to our last Thursday thought. I'm really actually excited for this one because this talks about retirement, and this is the final puzzle piece, if you will, of the equation. But today, we just wanted to thank you for joining us. There's always the disclosures. We're going to talk about a few legal and estate planning types of things that relate to retirees today. So if there's any questions out of that, please do feel free to look up the services of an estate attorney. And if you do need an attorney, we're more than willing to send you to one. So just let us know. So for today's Thursday thought, I thought we would start with the idea of the family financial puzzle piece. And as this is the last puzzle piece, I'll just kind of reiterate the first few. If you're listening and you've got adult children, or you are one of those adult children, or if you just happen to just graduate from college and you're on your own, we've got planning for every stage of life that you're at. So first stage, just you're on your own. That's your college graduates. That's where folks just need help setting up budgets, home, apartment lease, utilities, cable bills, all those fun things. Insurance, employee benefits, those are all things we cover with someone in that stage. The next stage is tying the knot, needs no more explanation. It's just folks tying the knot. They're getting married. Sometimes it's first marriage, sometimes it's second, sometimes it's third, and God forbid if it's the fifth one. But it happens. So we also help people no matter which number it is. Then the last is the new arrival. This, of course, needs no explanation. Sometimes the new arrival in today's world comes before tying the knot. Other times, traditionally, it comes after tying the knot. But everything you need to know about what to do when you're expecting a baby. The fourth puzzle piece is pre-retirement. So that's when the kids are leaving home. And at that point, you're like, okay, they're only coming back maybe to do a little laundry, Sunday dinner. What do I want my future to look like? So pre-retirement is that 10 to 15, 20-year period, depending on where you're at, that on the age of your children, that you're preparing for your own retirement and trying to get an idea of what lifestyle you want to have when retirement comes. And then, of course, retirement, which is the puzzle piece we're going to talk about today, that's that final stage. Now, it doesn't mean death. It means that you getting to a point that you have enough money that it generates an income for you. And of course, that comes from everything from Social Security to maybe a work pension, retirement money, 401ks, savings, downsizing your house. These are all typical things that retirees are looking at. So today we're going to talk about and cover the topic of retirement. And when it comes to retirement, everybody always thinks of this beautiful picture here, right? It's one step away from the Cialis ad. You have a couple on the beach, kind of holding hands, they're not in the bathtub, at least this time, watching the waves. This is going to be retirement, right? And the reality is that's actually not what, for most people, retirement looks like. So let's talk about retirement, and let's talk about just some characteristics of retirement. Typically, in today's world, we see our retirees at 60 plus. And of course, that's getting older and older and older, but most people don't even start thinking about retirement until they at least hit that 60. The next thing is that, people are entering the end of the accumulation phase where they're actually saving money and, they've been stocking money away in the 401k. Maybe you're hiding money under a mattress. Maybe you have some money in your brokerage account, right? Just anywhere you can possibly save and paying down debts. And at this point, you stop accumulating money and we get to the question of, okay, I'm now going to start distributing this money and living off of it. Because, of course, at Family Financial Partners, we borrowed the old Will Rogers comment that says, there's money only has one purpose, right? And that's to be spent. And the other one that he's known for is, I'm not worried about the return on my principal. I'm worried about the return of my principal. So, and that's very important to make sure you don't lose your money during the distribution phase. Now, it's very common in this phase to be the sandwich generation. We see this all the time, and I am not there yet. I'm sure I'm just a few years off from being in that phase myself, but I read the stress level of people that come in the office, and I can tell you that retirement isn't always everyone thinks retirement, I'll be done, I won't have to go to the office, and I won't have any more stress in my life. BS. In this sandwich phase, you're not only having to take care of your life, you're having to take care of oftentimes of of both or one of your parents on either side of the families, or 4 parents, 2 sets. And oftentimes we still see, especially the last couple months, there's a lot of adult children that are still at home. It may be that the child never went to, finish school. It could be they never went to college. It could be that the job that they just got out of college, 3, 4, 5 years in, they were the low person on the totem pole and they just got, furloughed because of COVID. So regardless what the situation is in this generation, we do see a lot of people, who are being pressed for time based on, just family members and the need to take care of them. The planning topics that are typical for this retirement stage are things like Social Security maximization. This is where it's kind of like when you buy a brand new car, you can drive down the road before you buy that brand new car and you will never see the car that you're going to buy, ever. Then you decide, oh, like me, I really like this Buick Enclave. I'm going to buy an Enclave, and I'm going to get a chocolate colored Enclave because it sounds really a lot more cool than brown. So I buy a chocolate Enclave, and then guess what? I see black Enclaves. I see red Enclaves, blue, silver, white. I even see some brown Enclaves, not chocolate because mine's special, right? But I see brown ones. So the same thing applies to Social Security. Once you get to the point where you are of age to start to think about your Social Security, suddenly, literally, you start to see articles on it. You start to get mailers on it. You start to see it anywhere and everywhere you go. It's in conversations with all your friends. It's a normal thing. And people put a lot of emphasis on it. But the key is not really to dwell upon it. I just always say the key is just to make sure you get it right, because you only have one real good shot. So that is something we'll talk about today. Medicare, this is another thing that happens. Nobody at 60 really thinks about it, but guess what? At 64 and a half, when all those mailers and calls and everything start coming in saying, hey, you're turning 65, that's when it becomes a priority for this age group. Income generation, we're going to talk about that. How do you generate income, right? Estate planning, how do you, if you are so blessed as to have assets that you are not going to need to sustain you through this retirement phase, how do we properly pass these assets on? And then the last topic we're going to talk about today is the topic of taxes. And, it's the one topic that every person from basically about February to June in the Family Financial Partners office, I can pretty much tell you that 8 out of 10 phone calls coming in are somebody asking a tax question or tax document question, or who just wants to air their opinion that they pay too much in taxes this year versus last year. And it repeats and repeats and repeats. So I'm super glad when we get to June, because we're pretty much done with that. And the funny part about that is, just from a financial planner standpoint, is people come in all the time and they complain to me about the amount of taxes they pay. And then we look at them and say, but you realize every single year you should be paying more taxes. And they're like, what? And they say, yeah, because every single year your accounts get bigger and bigger and bigger, barring a bear market or a pullback. So if your accounts are going up, theoretically, you're making more money. And if you're making more money, then you're going to have to pay some tax on that. So it's actually kind of an interesting conundrum that the more successful a client is in their financial situation, the more taxes they pay, and suddenly the angrier they get. So I've always found that very interesting. But as I always say, nobody went broke paying taxes. So we're going to cover taxes, though, and we're going to cover some things that if you are in that bucket of people that you're just so annoyed by the taxes you pay, well, I'm going to talk to you today about a few things that you may want to consider with your accounts that possibly could lower some of your taxes. So that's a reason to stick around right there. Now, before we start on that, let me talk to you about my definition of what retirement is. Because for those of you that heard me speak before, you may have heard that I have tried to actually retire at times. 1 year, 4 or 5 years ago, I think it was, 6 years ago, 2014, I planned to take 4 months off, just like spring and summer. I said, I'm just going to go to the country club and I'm going to hang out every day and I'm going to see what it's like to be a retiree, because my version was people retire, they go to a country club, they have Bloody Marys, mimosas, whatnot, they play golf, they have lunch, another 9 holes or whatnot, talk to people. warped view, okay? What I can tell you though is after doing this, okay, I realized that for some people, retirement is that, right? But I can tell you for me, that's not it. That's not what I want to work for. That's not what I plan to do. I need more meaning in my life. I need more interaction with a variety of people, right? Not just within a small group. And I do want to feel like I'm actually, speaking into people's lives, whether I'm working as a financial planner or whether I'm just Dave the friend and has all the time in the world. So for me, retirement is the idea that you finally reach the point that you have enough money and that money can create a sustainable income for you. And it doesn't matter what you do, whether you go out and earn more money or whether you just use that income. But in my opinion, once you have enough money to create a sustainable income, and that's the key, then you are retired. And it doesn't matter whether you're 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80. And a lot of people never even hit that because there's a lot of people that didn't defer enough gratification. So they're never going to have enough money to generate a paycheck forever. A lot of people have to kind of go with a drawdown scenario in retirement, which is I'll take X amount a year. I'm going to live to X age. And as long as I die by X age, I'll be good because my money as it comes down will be just enough to sustain me. Now, that's what retirement is. What retirement is not, though, I actually hate the word retirement. And after doing this for 24 years, I can tell you, it's probably the most overused word in a financial planner's phraseology book, if even that's a phrase, I don't know. But the point is that it's so easy to say to someone, when are you going to retire? And poof, you're supposed to have this number that, 60, 65, 70. Everyone has a number, right? No, they don't. Most people are actually, when you ask them that, they're sitting there on the spot and they're like, well, I'll just pick this number because either my work said they're going to get rid of me at this age, or my time's up, or I got my golden watch and I put in my 30 years of service, whatever it is. I don't like the word retirement because retirement for a lot of people has a negative connotation. It's actually not a happy word. And what I've learned over time is that most of the people that we work with, they don't want to be viewed as a retiree. They actually believe there's a lot more they have in life to give, regardless of their age, right? So I like to refer to it, and how we refer to it in our office and how we refer to it in all of our financial plans that we put together is we refer to it as a cash flow plan. Because the idea is, again, once you get to the point that your money has enough money to create cash flow, you are retired. So regardless of your age. Now, a lot of people choose to still work part-time in retirement. A lot of people, whether it's at a golf shop, right, in the pro shop, just for a few pennies here and there, right, a little spending money, or whether they do some consulting from their previous job, or they may continue doing exactly what they love to do simply because they love work. They don't like to fish. They don't like to golf. I actually understand that. I don't really like to golf either. I just like the people that are on the golf course. Let's not think about that though. But the point is everyone has the ability to do retirement the way in which you want to, but it all really comes down to creating proper cash flow. So today we're going to talk about how to create proper cash flow, and we're going to look through kind of 4 key areas, right, that we need to be thinking about when it comes to the challenges for you in retirement. Fair enough? Okay, I'm going to move fast on some of these. Some of these I'm just going to kind of dabble in, show you a number, show you a slide, talk about it. If you have any follow-up questions, right, just give me a ring at the office and we'll talk about that in greater length about that. But I know for a lot of you, there's going to be some of you that certain topics of this slide really hit a point, in a hot spot that you're like, I need to talk to Dave about that. And there are going to be other areas where you're like, not me at all. So for the sake of time and for everybody, I'm just going to blow through these ideas, take you through this, cover these quickly, and then you can let me know what you'd like more details on. Okay. So let's talk about this new world of retirement, right? We have the issue with taxes and accumulation, right? We're saving versus spending. We talked about that. And what happens for most retirees that really kind of freaks them out, right, is suddenly the kids are gone, so there's no more child tax credits, right? Maybe you just lost your mortgage deduction. There's some people pay off their house. They think they got to pay off your house to retire. Other people decide, no, that's probably not a good use of my money, and they don't. But regardless of which camp you're in, a lot of people do pay off their mortgage and lose that interest deduction. We lose those tax-free employer paid medical benefits, right? The insurance out there, a lot of the, we don't need the disability because we're retired, but the life insurance, the health insurance, all those sorts of things. And then we also lose the money, the free money going into the 401ks. And even in today's world, with the economy being what it is, some companies have cut their 401k back, but there's still a match for every dollar you put in. Okay, and then in addition, at the same time, you're hit with a ton of new information, whether it's in your mailbox, each mailer has COVID on it, whether it's in your emails, whether it's coming through text messages, maybe coming through on your Apple Watch, but or any friend you talk to, they're bringing up copies of Social Security, what we call RMDs, which are required minimum distributions. What those are distributions that the IRS says at a certain age you have to take from your IRA. Okay, and any kind of your retirement accounts, and they make you take those out. So you have to do a calculation each and every year for that. We do that for all of our clients. In addition, people are trying to figure out, okay, now that I don't have that employer healthcare, I'm paying for Medicare. And then, of course, the last one is long-term care. Now, for the sake of today's conversation, I'm not going to take you through the long-term care side. I think that really is kind of more a personal area that applies to each one of you. And if you have a question on that, we can talk greater. But let's talk about the biggest problem that we have is when people get to retirement, because you've lost all those deductions, suddenly you are paying more taxes. And a lot of people think, well, I'm going to quit my job, right? I'm going to take Social Security, take my pension. And I've been told all these years that as my work income goes down, I won't have to pay as much. Well, the reality is there's different kind of rules that work when you get to that retirement age, depending on when you take retirement and how you take your pension and what you choose with your Social Security. And today we're going to, like I said, just take you through all of this. So the biggest problem that you have in those 4 stages of retirement is that you're going to need simply a strategy put in place that anticipates the traditional taxes that you have to take, the RMDs and things like that, Social Security, pensions, all those sorts of things. And then possibly those surcharges, as they call them, or penalties related if you take Social Security early, or if you make too much money and suddenly Medicare taxes you additionally, or any kind of other income. Another income being like, you sell a business, you sell a big piece of real estate, something that you had for a long time and you're just downsizing, and suddenly it creates kind of fake income of an asset that you've held for a long time. So the 4 stages we're going to go through, and the 4 stages that people are in, and you may just say, which one of these apply to me, right? There's the pre-retirement, the 50 to 60, the work and save years, right? There's early retirement. We've already talked about those. 60 to 70, we call those the go-go years. That's where you finally have enough money to leave the job. You're in good shape. The knees probably don't need to be replaced yet. We're good. Hips are good, and we're go-go, okay? Then suddenly what happens, and this is just averages, not every single person on this call, but we find that 70 to 80 is the middle retirement, right? We call those the go slow years, because suddenly there's my hips hurt, my knees hurt, my ankles hurt. Sometimes the doctor visits, it goes from being a social thing and I'll meet you on the golf course, or let's go out and meet for dinner and drinks, to like, can you see me on my patio? Because I really don't want to move a lot. And you just start to slow down, and maybe doctor appointments become the highlights of the week, right? And then we have the late retirement, the 80 plus, and our society is living longer and longer, but for this group, we call those the no-go years. So if you think about it from a standpoint of a financial planner, how we plan for people's income, right, is we know in those pre-retirement years, a person's going to be basically spending what they make minus what they save, right? Okay. And then suddenly in early retirement, those 60 to 70, typically that income spend, as their income from work drops off and they have more time, when every day is a Saturday, what naturally happens? Well, you're going to spend more money. And then what we get to middle retirement, there may be big trips, right? There may be some like cruises or a trip to Europe, or it could be a cross the country RV trip that you always told the kids you do together. Everybody goes. But we're just moving a little bit slower, and our activity is not so high. And so what happens is that income that was up there suddenly starts to drop. Okay. And then late retirement, that's where the income really, really drops off. And it only starts to loop back up when healthcare, when long-term care costs start to hit medical costs. So what are some of the things you need to be worried about and watch for in retirement? Most people know all these four, so I'm not going to take a long time, but inflation. The idea simply is that what you buy at the grocery store, right? You want to make sure that each and every year in your financial plan that you've accounted for inflation happening to your milk, your eggs, your strawberries, your rubber tires for your car, you know, the gasoline at the gas pump. I know we haven't really had inflation there lately, but you know, as the economy's growing, we will. So, but you want to make sure you plan for inflation. The idea that your dollar this year is going to be able to buy the same thing for the equivalent of $1 plus inflation the next year and year and year and so forth. So longevity, that's just the issue of, hey, we're in a country that created stints, and they created them, and those stints are keeping people alive much longer than anybody anticipated. And so even as a financial planner, it used to be like, oh, just plan for the person to get like 85 to 90. And now most of our plans, we're fearful if we don't plan to 100, and they're saying even for millennials, we should be planning to 110 to 120, which I cannot imagine someone making it to that. I can't imagine what your lifestyle would be like if you make it to that age. The oldest person in the world, I knew this a couple months ago, but before COVID, but I believe he's 113 and like, let's see, 2 months ago. So he'd be maybe 150 days, but it's a Japanese man over there, but he's 113 and call him a half for sake. But that's some longevity. Obviously, you need to plan for expenses. People a lot of times just look at their paycheck and they think those are going to be my expenses in retirement. Then what they totally forget about is oh, I got to replace the tires in the car. I got to replace the car. The roof. The roof is literally on fire. No, hopefully not. But it just has to be replaced. We need new shingles, right? In addition, you have every single appliance in your house, I guarantee, will go out within a 16 to 18 month period of time. It's amazing obsolescence they've planned in, where we get to get the washer and dryer, and then suddenly the microwave, and then suddenly a dishwasher, and then you're like, oh my gosh, the stove. It's insane. Only to be followed, of course, by the refrigerator. So those are the things that people don't think of that they spend money on from time to time, but that's not part of your regular paycheck. Okay. And then healthcare. I mean, healthcare is a big one. You know, the earlier you retire, if you retire and you're retiring pre-65, then to pay for healthcare out of your pocket, that can often be the single greatest monthly bill you have in retirement. So it's really important to make sure you stay on top of those surprises. Okay, so you say, I got it, Dave. So what's the first thing I need to know about understanding my retirement and my taxes? Okay, the first thing is you have to know what that after-tax retirement saving picture looks like before you retire. We have so many people that come to us and they literally say, I retired 6 months ago, and now I want to talk to you about my investments and or whatnot. And I don't need a financial planner. I just want someone to manage my money. And then you look at what the choices they made, and you just go, if we had only talked, 6 months and a day before you retired, we could have really helped you out. I mean, it may be $500, $1,000, $2,000 a month difference. Just from my view, common sense, but that's because I've been doing something for 20 years plus. For the average person that's faced with a HR slide and a piece of paper or a Social Security office slide, online form saying, hey, pick one, you're just doing your best. So there's never any judgment in our office, but I'm just telling you, the earlier you can get in, the better it's going to be, because then we can actually know what your after-tax retirement savings picture looks like. Before you retire, we can plan accordingly. So let me give you an example of this. There's a lot of people where they think, I've got a ton of money, right? And they come into this and they're like, hey, I say, how much money do you have? They say, well, I have $500,000, right? So if we look at this scenario here, you've got $500,000, the box on the bottom left, or on the side left. But if it's in your 401k or an IRA, that's not really $500,000. That's not actually your money, right? Because it's your money plus Uncle Sam's money. So if you're married filing jointly, you can just follow this line here. What you can see is that $500,000, depending on your tax bracket, if you're at the 35% tax bracket and you just pulled it all out at the same time, which a lot of people, believe it or not, actually pull all their money out when they leave their work, which is, I personally believe, a terrible, terrible plan because you're paying the maximum amount of tax. So in that scenario, you might pay anywhere from $325,000 to $315,000 at a high tax rate. And then in addition, right, you'll be required to withdraw your required minimum distribution each year after you turn 72. So, I mean, it could just be a nightmare. So people often think, I've got 500,000, but they really don't. It's usually, I always say it's like 2/3 to be safe, maybe a little bit more. Now this chart, all this shows right here is this simply shows cumulative after-tax distributions. And the idea of this, I'll move this box. I'm gonna move my box so you can see this a little bit here. We'll see if I can. There we go. Okay, that's better. This shows you your tax rates here. And so, move here, sorry. Oop. There we go. Perfect. Okay, so what we have here is we have cumulative after-tax rates. So the idea simply is this: if you're more a picture person than a numbers person, if you don't pay any tax, that's the green line, then you can see how much more money you're going to get out of your accounts. Okay. At the same time, if you're paying maximum tax, the blue line, okay, you can see how much less money. It doesn't even matter the amount of money. All I want you to understand is, as you pull money out of your retirement accounts, the more efficient and the more planned you can be with those disbursements, rather than just send me 50 grand, send me 30 grand. I mean, I hear it all the time. The more planned you can be with those distributions, right? And have a financial planner actually look at that to try to keep you in the lowest tax rate possible. Then in a perfect world, maybe you end up in that 12% tax rate. And you're not the maximum tax rate, but you're also not paying any tax. Most people are always going to have some kind of tax. But the idea is significantly, though you can see the red line is significantly higher than that blue line. So you say, okay, but at least I'll still have my Social Security to supplement my income and my Medicare to pay my healthcare costs. So I should be fine, Dave, right? Well, here's the other problem, okay? Key number 2, Social Security and Medicare have their own tax traps. Then you need to plan for those too. And a lot of people say, well, what do you mean tax traps? I mean, all it is signing up for, Social Security coverage and signing up for Medicare. I can do this myself. This is no biggie, right? Let's talk about it. So there's a couple different types of approaches, right, to retirement, okay? We talked about it earlier. You can retire completely, right? You can semi-retire with less or fewer hours. And you could semi-retire in a passion-driven job. We talked about that when we started. And you could just retire and volunteer. A lot of people do that, right? That's why we have so many people with service organizations. And we're very grateful for that because retirees actually have that time. Kids have moved on, so they have that time to give back. And thank you if you are volunteering somewhere. I thank you for the bottom of my heart because it makes me feel less guilty right now not volunteering. And I know that, hey, in 20 years or so, I will be volunteering a lot more because I won't have to come in here. So let's talk about working in Social Security, okay? So how your Social Security benefit is calculated. A lot of people don't know. They just get that Social Security, a statement from Social Security, and they look at it and they go, okay, these are all my years that I earned, right? And they have everything for your working history and the amount you paid in Social Security and all that. Well, it's actually based on the highest 35 years. So what that means is that if you've worked for 36 years, right, before you retire, then one of those years, the lowest year is going to drop off as far as how Social Security reviews your benefit. Now, if it's 1 year, that may or may not make a difference. But believe it or not, let's say you worked for 45 years, right, from the time you were 20 to 65, okay? In that scenario, 10 of those years in your 20s, they may be like really, really, really low. Or we've even seen situations with clients where they had kind of a midlife crisis and decided at age 50 that they were going to go work for a nonprofit for a year. And the nonprofit meant that they actually didn't have any money, right? I mean, they didn't get a paycheck at all. And so that year of 0, believe it or not, the year at 21 might be a lot higher than that year at 0. So it drops off. But they look at the 35 highest years. Okay, that's one thing that's really important. So as you're reviewing your Social Security statement, it's really important to take a look and just see where that's at. And sometimes, the idea being, sometimes working an extra year or two could actually make a difference in how your calculation figures out what you're going to get from Social Security. Bet you didn't know that. The second thing is that earnings after 62 can still increase your Social Security retirement. So a lot of people think that, well, I get to age 62, right, and my earnings, they don't get bigger at all. In fact, I have a lot of people come in and they say, well, at 62, I'm going to retire from my job and I'm going to work part-time. And they'll say, does that mean if I work part-time, it's going to hurt my Social Security benefit? Because I see what my Social Security benefit is, but I've made more money each year. And when I make less money, isn't it going to go down? No, it's not going to go down. It can only go up. Okay. But if even it may be that year of 63, for example, even if you're working part-time, even the $12,000 you make that year may be much better than the very first job you had that was $4,800 or whatnot. So keep in mind that your earnings can only go up as you're in your calculation as you're making money and as you're working. Now, the one big thing that a lot of people do miss out on, though, and everyone hears, hey, you need to take your Social Security as quickly as possible because what? Because if you don't take it, you lose it, right? And it will take forever for you to break even on that. And we don't want to be in that situation. And so everybody goes out and they say, I'm going to take my Social Security as soon as I can. The problem is if you're taking Social Security at 62 or before your full Social Security retirement age, the problem that happens there, if you're earning income, then you're going to be taxed, right? And actually penalized on those Social Security benefits. So as this slide here shows, if you earned, for every $2 earned, right, you're going to lose $1 in benefits for any amount in 2020 over $18,240 in Social Security benefits. Now, these are W-2 wages, right? So, if you're taking money out of your pension or things like that, that doesn't harm you in that calculation. But if you are actually going out to a job and you're making, for example, it could be you make, the example I'd give you is, let's just say $30,000, right? And before you were making $60,000. So now you cut your salary in half. You're making $30,000, but that is roughly $12,000, right, over the limit. Now for that $12,000, right, going to divide that in half. You're basically going to have to pay back $6,000 of that. And it may be that by taking your Social Security at 30 or at 62, it may be that your Social Security based on those wages might have been $3,000 a month. And so it may have been that you looked at it and said, well, I don't have my $60,000 job. I now have a $30,000 job, but I got my Social Security. So now I have $66,000, 36 plus from Social Security plus 30 for my job. So that $66,000 is good. I'm good. Well, then you're paying $6,000. So suddenly you didn't actually get an increase. You actually got the exact same amount of money. So there's a lot of times where people will postpone taking, if you are working a job and it's over that $18,000, they'll just postpone taking the Social Security and let that Social Security grow until they get to the point of actually fully retiring. Okay. Now, it doesn't mean you can't go out and work at the golf shop or, drive. I'll have a number of people I know drive rental cars or work at, concerts or events when we do have concerts and events, just so they can watch the concert events or out of Keeneland, right, as an usher, and they have a little fun with that, a little extra spending money. As long as it's under that $18,240, you don't have to worry about it. So just go about your ways. But if you're in that gap, if you're over $18,240 and right in that retirement age, we probably need to talk about that and figure a strategy out for you. Okay. Now, the other thing that people don't think about when it comes to Social Security is everyone thinks that Social Security is free. And it is, and technically, right, there is no tax on your Social Security. But what happens is there are tax brackets. I start at 10%, right? And they go up, up, up. There's 6 of them. We'll get to those a little later. But your Social Security and whatever amount of Social Security that you're taking is like, it fills in those first few tax brackets. So anything and everything above that, right? You're suddenly in a higher tax bracket. But then let's say you're still working that part-time job, right? The golf shop, okay? And you say, well, I mean, I'm already collecting Social Security and I'm not making more than 18,000, so I shouldn't have to pay any penalties. Well, that's correct. You're not having to pay any penalties, right? But you're still going to have to pay Social Security on whatever that amount of income is, okay? Even if you're getting that benefit. So a lot of people are surprised by that, but don't worry about that. Doesn't hurt you. And even that little partial income, again, could offset something, your first job in high school, your first job as an adult, right? Could offset that and actually increase your benefit going forward. Now, let's talk about Medicare and taxes. This is the other trap that we get into with a lot of people. So there's this thing called the Medicare IRMA cliff, okay? And I'm going to keep it real simple and short. But this sweet couple here, as you can see, they're taking Medicare, right? They're taking Part B and D. So they're taking full Medicare with the drug supplement. And they have a modified adjusted gross income, a MAGI, as we call it, of $271,000. And what happens is they simply sell stock. And they have a $1,000 gain. And so at their current tax bracket, right, they would owe basically $188 in tax, okay, 150 plus 38, federal, state, whatnot. And so their tax bracket would be 18.8%, right? Well, here's the problem is what happens with this, I'll leave my picture there because you can see the left side. With Part B, okay, Medicare, they have a chart that they use. And they adjust that on an annual basis based on your tax return, okay? And this is just sent to them. So there's nothing you fill out. They figure it out and they send you a new bill. And how that works is for these folks, because they were in a tax bracket, I wish I had a little laser here to show you, but if we look at the married joint and then where that red circle is, and you can see they are at the 218 to 272, what happens is they go over that 272 line is suddenly their total monthly premium, right? And this is per person monthly premium, goes from 289, right? It increases to 376. And then what happens is for their joint couple, if you will, or I'm sorry, the joint cost increase goes from like an additional 144 they're paying to now 231. So the thought here is that a lot of people don't think about their tax brackets. The bottom line is this: a lot of people don't think about their tax brackets other than just how much do I pay in tax. They don't think about how Medicare focuses in there. But why is that important? Well, let's say that you are actually in that. And by the way, if they raise that premium, so if you're married filing jointly and you're under 174,000, you're just paying as of this year 144 bucks, right? Is your total monthly premium, okay, that you're paying. And if you happen to be in the 174, 218, you're paying the 202, okay, which is the $57.80 higher, right, per month than the 144. Well, let's say you're in the 144, you're making 174,000 or less. And then suddenly you sell a farm or you sell a business or you sell something. And suddenly that sale, this is the whole point, it pops your income up, right? Just for that 1 year, right? Wherever it pops your income up, that means for the next 12 months, you're going to have to pay a higher Medicare monthly premium, okay? Now, the question that everyone asks is, let's say I did have that one bump in my earnings, Dave, and I have to pay this. Most of the times, people don't really plan for that. So suddenly, if I sold a farm and then suddenly now I'm paying $231.40 monthly, right? Times 12, right? Times 2 people, suddenly like $5,000. Okay, that can be a big difference in your budget, okay? And this is just something that, on the other hand, if you were able to sell that farm over a few different years potentially, right, as like a buyout, it actually, you may not have to realize everything at the very start, okay? Now, let's say you're one of those people where you did get a letter from Medicare and what you have to pay just spiked. Okay, if you're in that bucket, a lot of people go, well, does that mean I have to pay that forever, right? Because you do pay Medicare forever. No, you can actually, there actually is a form online that you can fill out through the Medicare site that actually says, hey, I know I'm paying this higher amount, and it's going to automatically bill you that higher amount. But you can fill in the form and say, hey, I would like to, this is a new tax year, and I would like to ask for it to be lowered based on where I'm at now. And they will consider that, and if they approve it, then they will actually lower that. And if there was time during that consideration, they'll actually apply a refund to your Medicare account. So you'll get that money back. So the idea there, though, is just on Medicare, make sure you plan for major, sells of assets, and make sure you let your financial planner know what they are. Because if you don't let your financial planner and or your accountant, that financial planning team, right, know that you're going to do that until after the fact or until when you take your tax documents in, there's absolutely nothing that any of us can do to fix that situation. Okay, I'm just going to fly through that part. This was just talking about how it goes up. I've already covered that. Okay, so any other tax traps that I face in retirement? Well, here's the next one we're going to talk about, is how you use taxable and tax deferred and tax-free assets to manage your income and tax brackets efficiently. That's a lot, okay? Basically, we're going to talk about how you take your money out, right? Real simple. And there's buckets, okay? So what I'm going to take you through is just an example. So the question here is, which accounts to spend first, okay? And whenever I'm presenting this, I always talk to people, I say, what would you do? What would you do first? And every single person that I talk to about this usually picks a different strategy, and it's just based on their own experience in life, right? So for this couple, we'll just take you through here. Sam and Mary, they need to spend about $8,500 a month, and they have Sam's IRA and Mary's IRA each have perfectly $450 on the nose in their accounts. In addition, they each have Roths, right, that they funded $60,000, and they have a joint bank account, right? Just maybe some cash, CDs, whatnot in there. $300,000, okay? So the question is, what do we take first? Now, a lot of people say the conventional wisdom is we're going to spend the taxable money first, think the bank account, right? And then we're going to spend the tax deferred money, the IRA, and then only after that, we're going to spend that tax exempt money, okay? Now think about that. Does that make sense to you? So in other words, going back here, right? What are we going to do? We're going to spend the blue, the joint bank account. Then we're going to spend each of their IRAs. And then once we're done with that, we're going to spend the Roth. Okay? That's tax exempt. Now, there are a whole bunch of studies here, and I have not read these. I've done the Cliff Notes on them, but I have not read these. So if you are one of those types that you like to read all sorts of studies and research, these are the things that actually are the basis and the facts behind the new strategy, if you will, that a lot of financial planners are using with their clients, which is a non-traditional strategy. So the alternative approach, this new approach, is we spend the taxable money first, right? So the bank accounts. But we also, okay, especially if you do not need all of the money, right, for your income, and you're not going to exhaust all of it in your lifetime, which numerous amounts of people are not going to spend all their money, right? We'll then convert some of the IRAs to Roth IRAs in the low tax years, which right now we're actually in historically low tax years. So it's a great time to be doing this. And then we spend the tax deferred money until it's depleted, okay? And then we go back and we spend the tax exempt money. So the only difference in this really, right, is we're going to convert some of these assets. Now, let me take you kind of through the story of two portfolios, okay? We've got Stephen, and Stephen retired in 1976 during a bear market, right? Okay, that was a year before I was born, to date myself, but not really probably any different than the bear market we just had. It just lasted a lot longer, right? It wasn't 2 months, okay? And then we have Peter, who retired in 1988, but he retired in a bull market, okay? And again, I was 13, so I don't remember that market. But from 97 on, I remember everything. So they both have $500,000 in their portfolios. And to keep it very simple, they both have a portfolio mix of 50% stocks and 50% bonds, okay? And they have their annual withdrawals. They're taking roughly $40,000 inflation adjusted out of their portfolios. Now, so let's take you through Stephen's portfolio. Remember, this is the bear market. So what happens in this is you can see the 500,000, right? 50% stocks, 50% bonds, 40,000 a year coming out, a little bit for inflation, so you can still buy the same milk, strawberry, eggs, bread at the grocery store, right? What happens over a very short period of time, right, is Stephen just loses suddenly 2/3 of his value, right, in a mere 12 years. Really spooky, okay? On the other hand, Peter in the bull market, right, same exact portfolio, right, in a 12-year period, his portfolio suddenly goes from 500,000 to 1.263 million. And he, of course, thinks his financial guy is brilliant, whereas on the other hand, Stephen back here, he's like, I hired an idiot. What was I thinking? It wasn't the idiot's fault. It's what happened in the market. So what are the couple lessons we can kind of take away from this? Is reality is nobody has a crystal ball. Nobody does. Market conditions are always unpredictable and they're always changing. The second thing is that you can't just have stocks and bonds, in my opinion. You need to have a more diversified portfolio than that. And believe it or not, I would say 98% of the people that we see come in, when you look and see what they're doing in the work retirement plan, it's pretty much stocks and bonds. There's nothing else, okay? And I think in part the reason that is it's not that people are ignorant to the fact, it's just majority of the time, those are the choices they're given, right? They're not really allowed to pick a lot of other strategies. That's becoming more and more prevalent the last like 5 to 10 years. But before that, a lot of those other alternative products didn't even exist. So, and just in the last couple of years, it's become much more, a much bigger option, and there's been much greater availability within 401k plans for folks to have things other than just stocks and bonds. And then lastly is that, investing is that ongoing process, and it needs to be periodically adjusted. So it's no different than, I love to actually garden. I love fruits. I love vegetables. Obviously, I love food, right? But I also like flowers, and they're beautiful. And every garden has a season. And for any gardeners out there, that when you put your bulbs in, right, early, and it's freezing, it's hard digging that ground. But as they come up and they're beautiful, and you have daffodils, right? And the daffodils will come up before the tulips. But if you don't go out and actually cut your daffodils, then whenever the next storm is or rainy day, those daffodils are pretty much going to lose all their petals. So you better cut the bouquet of daffodils and bring them in, right? But then the problem is you don't have any beautiful daffodils, right? But guess what happens? Suddenly, the tulips start blooming. And as the tulips bloom, right, it's the same thing. Man, my yard, I take this picture. When I sell my house, this is the picture I'm going to use with these beautiful tulips. But again, first storm that comes, first raindrop that drops, what happens to those tulip bulbs, right? Or the flowers? The tulips just go, phew, right? So you got to cut those tulips. You got to enjoy them, okay? And there's so many other things, roses. We're not going to go through it. The whole point is you understand that just like a garden where you have to cut things and you have to trim things back in order to get more growth, and actually in order to protect your enjoyment of that garden, right? The same thing has to be done within your portfolio. And a lot of people will just set the portfolio and forget it. And I'm a big believer we've got to be adjusting that. Now, there's times when people say, well, how often, right? And I can tell you, like, this year has been a really weird year. There's a lot of changes we've been making in portfolios for clients. And the reason we've been making those changes is simply that the market volatility that's occurred, these swings in the market, right, are they're not unprecedented. They've happened before, but they are violent and vicious, and they need to be addressed. Now, there's also years that I remember, like 14, 15, 16 in the markets, where a little volatility here or there, but for the most part, not a lot of things had to happen. So for those years, I literally took my hands and sat on them and said, I'm not going to do anything, even if I want to. I'm not going to do anything, because there's no benefit in making any kind of changes right now, because things are actually moving up in the right direction. Okay. Right now, we don't have that environment, so changes have to be made. So if you haven't looked at your retirement accounts, your 401ks, your old IRAs, old work accounts they had from a previous employer, and looked at actually trying to rebalance those and take a look, it's something that needs to be addressed. Now, let's talk about Roth IRA conversions for a second. And so the idea, if you recall, was we said, hey, these guys have their portfolios and and there's bear markets, there's bull markets. But what happens if we're in the scenario where we don't need this money? Okay, so we do not need this money. We're not sure. We may need the money, but we don't think we need it immediately. We want to pass it on efficiently, right? And or if we need it, it's not going to be for another 15, 20, 25 years until we get to the point of having additional healthcare expenses. But we all believe, at least most of us, I believe that taxes in our future will be higher, not lower, at least from an inflation standpoint, than they are today. So therefore, while taxes are lower, what we could do is you could take a certain amount, you can convert that, right? When you convert any money from your IRA, when you pull it out, that actually the government looks at, the IRS looks at and says, any money taken out of an IRA or a 401k, right, is treated as income. So it looks just like W-2 income, okay? You pay tax on the amount that you take out of the 401k, just like you pay tax on the amount that you convert to a Roth IRA, because a Roth IRA is tax-free moving forward. But you only have to pay that tax once. And then once you pay that tax, you're good to go. So as an example in this, we have Jill who converts $100,000 from her IRA to a Roth IRA, right? She's going to have $100,000 additional income, okay? But the conversion income will be taxed at Jill's rate. Now, you may say, well, what is Jill's rate? Well, this is something we've been using with all of our client families as a discussion point. So these are your tax The one thing about doing this by yourself instead of with the other guys is I never have a chance to actually get a water break. So got a little water break. All right. So these are the 7 tax brackets that exist. Okay. They go from 10 all the way to 37%. And so in Jill's scenario, what Jill did, it was her tax bracket before conversion, this top line, right? She had fully filled with her income the 10% bucket. She had fully filled the 12% bucket, and she had filled a portion of the 22% bucket. But in this scenario, she decided to convert $100,000 from an IRA to a Roth. Well, that $100,000 conversion she did, the result of that, if you look at after conversion, the 10% bucket was already filled, the 12% bucket was already filled. But what happened when she put that additional $100,000 into the 22% bucket? Well, it just filled that 22% bucket completely. And she could have done more and gone to 24%, only a 2% difference. But for her purpose, she thought 100,000 is perfectly fine. Okay. The idea is, whether you're Jill or whether you're whoever you are, if you're not needing that money and you know what your tax bracket's in, and you're in one of those lower 22, 24, anything 24 or less, I think it totally makes sense to be looking at doing some kind of conversion. And it doesn't have to be a one-time thing. It doesn't have to be $100,000 either. It could be $10,000 a year. It could be $20,000 a year. It could be because the markets currently aren't at their 52-week highs, but they're also not at 52-week lows. They are less than they were, though, at the start of February. Well, because they're off, it could be that 100,000 that you do convert at this point might have been worth 120,000, right? 130,000. So the tax you pay is not on the 130,000 it was, it's on the 100,000. So even if you convert it, right, liquidate whatever investments are in, then convert the 100,000 as an example, just like Jill did, into the 22% tax bracket. You can then go back and buy the exact same investments that you were in, right? But now it's Roth. So now as they go back up, assuming they go back up and hit a new high, let's just, for this assumption, not everything does that, but fair disclosure, let's just assume it does. Then you would now have 130,000 or whatever that number was, but the difference is 130,000 now completely tax-free because in a Roth. So that's just something that a lot of people don't think about, but I think it's really worth mentioning. Now, one of the other times outside of market volatility that you should consider doing a conversion, okay? Well, the ideas that I just run here is any years that you have low income. Not going to spend a ton of time on this. So if you're a business owner, any business owner there right there have a break in their business income this year? I think so. So if you're in that bucket, it's a no-brainer to look at converting right now, right? Because I can't imagine that next year is going to be worse than this year has been so far. We'll see. Maybe you have unusually high expenses with your business that could offset some of the taxes, right? You're getting a tax credit from the business, so it offsets some of the taxes you have to pay. Maybe you have high, like kind of what we call non-reoccurring medical bills. You know, maybe someone had to go to the hospital and as a part of your adjusted gross income, it's significantly up there, right? You could use those as you know, basically to help offset some of the tax you pay. Or let's say you're in that, I just retired, okay, but I'm not going to take Social Security until I maximize it, and I'm going to wait maybe a year or two to maximize my pension, or I'm not allowed to take my pension. Some people say, I'm not allowed to take my pension until 65, Dave, and I'm 63, 64. So I'm going to wait a little bit, and I'm not taking any other IRA distributions. So if you're in one of those situations, right, where your taxes are lower because you have quit your job or you've cut your job back in a lower income period, that's also a good time to convert. Now, we just talked about this, so I'm not even worried about that. A couple other things that are just things that people ask when they're looking at doing Roth conversions and strategies that people don't really think about, but I think are very important to think about is, let's say you do have some life insurance policies. I'm talking about like permanent or whole life insurance policies. During that period of doing a Roth conversion where you're going to pay a little bit of money on that conversion, another way of kind of fooling around with your income line is you could always withdraw some tax-free money from the life insurance policy, right? Which would be written up as a loan to you from your life insurance policy, and therefore it's not taxable, okay, as a loan. And then you could, the other thing you could do is you could sell your highly appreciated stock, right, for just low or no capital gains. And again, that could just be something that would offset some of these taxes. And then the last thing you could do is you could take distributions from your IRA or 401k to simply take advantage of that lower tax rate. So there's a lot of different ways of managing your tax bracket, and obviously that includes, you need to talk to your accountant about that, you need to talk to your financial planner about that, but the whole idea is anything we can do to possibly kind of manage the tax brackets and change. Some years you may take more from insurance policies, other times you may sell from stocks because then you only have capital gains tax, other years you may take less of those things and distributions from IRAs or 401ks to make up for where your tax bracket is. And then other years, if your income is better, right, but you're still not, you know, at max, you may say, well, I'm not going to take anything from the IRAs or 401ks. I'm going to switch it around. I'm just going to take it from the life insurance. I'm just going to sell some stock for some capital gains, but maybe I have some losses due to the market right now that I can offset those highly appreciated stocks with, so that I don't pay a whole lot of tax, but I have cash. And again, like we always said, it's always about cash flow. That's all that matters, is the cash flow. Okay, doesn't matter where it comes from, just cash flow. A couple other things that we're not going to take a whole lot of time on, but you can always, if you have an HSA from your employer, you can always use that HSA for any kind of, you know, medical expenses, things of that nature, or to cover, you know, certain healthcare costs if you're of age. And then, you know, if you are a business owner and you have what we call a QBI deduction, or you've ever even heard that term, just give me a ring and we'll fill you in on QBI deductions. They're kind of a unique beast. So for purpose of time, I know we're getting close to our hour. I'm going to keep moving forward. I want to talk to you about one other thing on the charitable giving side, because this is something that a lot of people are like, you know, this time of year, you have a lot of people that are They know, especially with what's going on in the world, they know that charities are having issues, and they're trying to figure out, like, what can I do? Can I help them? How should I give? So in this example, you have, Alan Shirley. They're in a 24% tax bracket. They give $5,000 to their charity choice. We'll call it the church. Easier for me to remember. They have $15,000 in existing itemized deductions. Okay. They have a new standard deduction, which is right now $27,000 this year. And so a $5,000 donation from them actually receives no federal tax benefit anymore under the new rules. Okay. So in their scenario, I'm just going to skip ahead. In their scenario, what we have is there is a rule that applies, and it's this rule right here that applies to any kind of what they call qualified charitable distributions, right? But after 70 and a half, okay? So what they're going to do in this scenario is they're going to take money directly from their IRA, okay? And they're going to move it, what typically people will do, right? And this is what we don't want to do. They're going to move it from the IRA to the checking account, and they're going to write the check to the charity, right? And by doing that, they had taxes withheld at 24%, right, on the 5,000. So it was actually 6,200 to get to the 5,000. Okay. Well, with this new rule and deduction rules and how you can write off charitable things, because of this, it doesn't really help them at all on their taxes. They're just actually paying to give to the charity. Okay. We don't want to do that. So what are we going to do? So what we're going to do is we're just going to take out the checking account. You see what I did? Last slide, there's the checking account. This slide, no checking account. Last slide, checking account, no checking account. So what we're going to do here is we're going to take that money from the IRA. We're going to actually have their advisor, right? We'll write a letter. We'll contact the charity, the church, and they'll actually get the instructions to move $5,000 exactly directly from the IRA to the charity. Okay. Now, by doing it that way, that $5,000 goes straight to the charity, right? The $5,000 happens to satisfy their RMD, required minimum distributions. There's no other distributions they have to take that year. The $5,000 is excluded from the taxable income. So in other words, they don't have to pay any taxes on this. And so then the tax bill on that distribution, when before it was $6,200, right, to get $5,000. Okay, they had to pay that. Well, now it's zero. So what happens at the very bottom, you can see, suddenly their total cost of contribution is really not even $6,200 and not even, the full $5,000, because they don't have to pay that tax. Now it is $5,000 out of the account, right? But they were already going to give that away. So, but the point is the real difference is that $1,200 in savings that they would have otherwise had to pay. Okay. And so anytime you're giving money, right now with today's rules to a charity, if it's any kind of significant amount, I would advise just give us a ring. We can talk to you about different plans, and there's all types of gifting strategies. This is just one of them, but this is a real simple one to kind of consider. Now, so let's say you're in the situation where you say, hey, I'm really hoping, Dave, that I've got assets to pass on to my family. Okay. So, but I don't know, I'm not really sure if I'm actually going to get there or not. But if I do have money that I've planned and I want to pass on to the kids, what do I need to do? How does all that figure in? So the key four is just, we always talk about organize, organize, organize. There are so many people that, simply do not organize their anything. They have all their statements and they think they put it in a file, right? And that's good. But that's just an organization of like what happened in the past. It doesn't really help the kids at all. So we believe it's really important to use, we use a software called eMoney that actually Fidelity owns. And it helps us take in all of the client assets and aggregate those assets so they're all organized on a spreadsheet. And the benefit of that is then everyone can see it. We can see it, the client can see it. If you want your CPA to see it, make sure they get a copy. If you want your estate attorney to see it, they'll get a copy. And then everyone can actually weigh in and design an actual plan for those assets that will then benefit the family should you not need all of them and should you pass them on. Okay. So one thing that is a real simple thing that a lot of people don't think about in this example is you have Phil and Mary here, and Phil and Mary have a joint brokerage account, right? Real simple, nothing special. And they're joint tenants with rights of survivorship, okay? Let's say this account, for this purpose, has $120,000 in long-term capital gains. And suddenly Phil is just diagnosed with a terminal illness, and he's got 18 months to live, okay? So the problem that you have in this kind of scenario is, you know, everyone's shocked right now. The whole family is just like, and what happens a lot of times, and I hate it for families when they're going through times like this. But a lot of times what happens during this is people tend, and this is just normal, they tend to just put blinders on and just focus on the health and not really think about how this health situation and unfortunately terminal illness is going to affect the survivors in the family, okay? So I'm going to give you a couple of examples of just like what would happen to this account and to this family. So in scenario one, right, this is the do nothing after the diagnosis. They just put the blinkers on, they look straight, nobody thinks about anything. Phil dies, Mary inherits half, right, of the joint account, okay? And she also, right, has hers, okay? But the step up in the basis on the part she eliminates, right, it eliminates the long-term capital gains on Phil's 60,000, okay? So if she'd sold all the investments though, she'd only owe income tax on her gains, right? But the problem, so we get into is her gains on the long-term capital gains on that 60,000, right? She'd only owe the tax on that plus any gain on the remainder after Phil's death. But because she didn't do it, right, she, in that scenario, owes tax on her 60,000, right, plus on any of the other half after Phil's death. Okay, now, how can we avoid this? Okay, how we avoid this is as soon as the diagnosis occurs, right, for Phil, we immediately move the money into one name, and that's Phil's name, okay? When Phil dies, what happens is that 120,000 receives a step-up basis, meaning that even if there are gains, right, on that account, suddenly that account is now stepped up to the date of death, and let's just say it's 120,000. Mary then receives this as an inheritance from Phil, right? And Mary now can sell that 120,000, and she literally pays zero in taxes. Now, that's not like rocket science, but very few people ever do this. So that's just a real simple scenario, something to keep in mind, something that, again, it's just showing the value of talking to a financial planner. And as I always say to people, you know, hey, it's really a simple question. You know, when you go to sell those investments, would you rather owe tax on 60,000 gains or no tax, right? And every single person says absolutely no tax. So that's one of our goals. Just if there's something that changes also health-wise in your family, please always let your financial planner know ASAP. And when needed, we'll pull in your accountant, we'll pull in your estate attorney, we'll make sure we get that done. I've had that happen a couple times this year, and in both cases, a quick review of the situation, we were able to add value, if you will, and simplify things for the survivors. So just something to keep in mind. And let's talk about the Secure Act. This is just real quick. We're almost done today. A lot of people are asking about, or have heard, you may have heard of the Secure Act. It was passed 12/31/19, became effective January 1st, 20. And it's very simple for retirees, right? There's a lot of other things for just worker bees and the economy and all the youth out there, okay? But if you're in a retired bucket, the biggest things that affect you are there's just simply no more age limits for contributing to an IRA. So it used to be that you could contribute till 70 and a half. And we'd have that happen every now and then where the client hits 70 and a half, but you know, we're thinking they're still 70, but actually 70 and a half. So suddenly the check that they sent in to make the contribution, you can't hit 70 and a half. Now that's gone. You can continue as long as you have earned income, you can continue contributing, okay? In addition, there's no forced IRA spending until age 72. So where it used to be, even if you didn't need the money, right, at 70 and a half, or April 1st after the year, you hit 70 and a half. It's a weird one. The IRS will require you to take the required minimum distribution, RMD, out of your portfolio. Now they've said, you know what? If you don't need the money, we're going to give you an extra year and a half, basically. You don't have to take it until April 1st of the year in which you turned 72. So just a little bit longer runway, if you will, for your assets to grow. And then the third one, which is actually the biggest one, and I'm just going to be real brief on this, but if you think you're affected by this, please do give me a holler. But there's now a 10-year limit on inherited IRAs. Now, let's say you're sitting here reading this and you're like, my mother or father or both passed away and they left me what they call an inherited IRA or beneficiary IRA. And that happened in 2015, and it still says it's a beneficiary IRA for me. And I haven't really done anything with it. Does this affect me? No, it doesn't affect you. As long as the account was set up 2019 or earlier, right, then and funded, you don't have any kind of issue with this new inherited IRA. However, on the other side, if you have a parent who is elderly and is in the no-go stage, right, of retirement, and they do have a lot of assets that they are not going to use, and they're definitely going to pass on to you or your siblings or whomever, niece, nephew, you name it. Then if they're in that situation, we really do want to get together and do some planning for them, because now there's a 10-year limit on those inherited IRAs, okay? So if you remember those tax buckets that we showed you earlier, when you have that 10-year limit on inherited IRAs, the problem that happens is it now says basically, we don't care if you take the money year 1, year 2, year 3, each and every year, but by the time you get to the 10-year anniversary date on that IRA, that beneficiary inherited IRA has to be fully paid out, okay? And if not, there are penalties. Now, why is that important? Let's say that you did some legal trusts, and you set some trusts up for your family, and you are in those no-go years, right? And if you're in that stage, or you have a parent in that stage and they set it up, they may have set the trust up to say, hey, you can have, whatever the required minimum distribution is each year until the trust is exhausted, right? Once the money goes in the trust. The problem that you have with that with inherited IRAs is that then technically there's no required minimum distribution anymore, right, from the inherited IRA. So suddenly what could happen is year 1, you get no money from that. Year 2, you get no money from that. Year 3, no money, all the way through until year 10, all of a sudden you get all the money because it has to come out. And that is, if it comes out as a lump sum, then that's no different than selling the family farm, selling your business, winning the lottery. It's going to put you typically in a very high tax bracket quickly, and there's no other plan we can do around that. So again, the two ideas here are, if you have a bunch of money that you know you're not going to use, or you have a parent, right, that's an elder, and they're not going to use it, and it's definitely being passed on to you or your siblings or some family members, then what you want to do is you want to make sure to review their legal documents with the attorney that you set it up with, or if you need a referral, I can refer you to an attorney, and make sure that if there's any trust or language in there about any kind of, income stream coming out as a benefit to the family, that may need to be reworded and corrected, right? In addition, if there is a bunch of money in IRAs that's going to be inherited, and you already happen to be in a very high tax bracket, let's say you make a lot of money. Let's say you make $300,000, $400,000, $500,000, $1 million a year, okay? When you inherit that money, you're going to have to pay tax on it, right, at your tax bracket. So the problem that you get on that beneficiary IRA, okay, is if you can have the parent start to convert some of that money to a Roth IRA, right, each and every year for the rest of their life, or until they convert it all, you can save yourself a ton of money on taxes. And I always just put it as this: would you rather the money go to the government, or would you rather it go to your family? And in between that, if you want to go to church, you can go directly to the church too. And with this new rules, you do not have to pay tax on that money as long as you direct it directly to the charity. So the idea is we're just here, our job number one is to make sure your assets are protected for your income stream and for your cash flow, okay? Number two, we want to always reduce those taxes that you pay, right? And number three, we want to make sure that we can help you be the best fiduciary, best steward of that money that you inherited, gifted, or were blessed to receive. And if we can do all three of those things, then your assets should be something that may be passable to multiple generations. And that's where the real gift occurs, because then generations of family members, can use that for good throughout our world. So just something to think about with the Secure Act and how it could impact you as a retiree. Now, you may say, oh my gosh, Dave, how in the world am I supposed to figure all that out? That's just way too much, okay? Well, the good thing is, let's just break it down, okay? A couple things and tips for you to close this out today. So first and foremost, you need to remember what stage you're in, right? So if you're watching this and you really actually are pre-retirement, right? You're in that, let's say before 60, then the question that we would want to work with you on is making sure we know what your after-tax, savings are before retiring, okay? And we want to make sure you're funding your Roth IRA accounts and getting that as much tax-free money in there as possible. And even if you've been told that, well, my income, Dave, is too much, so I can't fund a Roth, call me. I may have a solution. Give me a ring. Now, on the other hand, if you're in that early retirement stage, 60 to 70, right? At that stage, we want to educate you and help you understand your Social Security benefits, how they work, right? How you can effectively pull them and maximize them and avoid any kind of penalties. And we want to actually also discuss Medicare and the taxation of it as far as how your future income and Medicare are going to fit in retirement. So in other words, think of it as we're talking about what we're going to do before we do it. Okay, so there's no surprises. And at that same stage in the early retirement, if you can, we fill that tax bucket, right, that tax bracket with any kind of IRA to Roth conversions in those low income years. So if 2020 happens to be a low income year, I know for a lot of people, we're all affected by this, right? We're all affected. So, but if it hurts your income, this may be a perfect year where you can start to convert some money from an IRA to a Roth IRA. Now, if you're in middle retirement, 70 to 80, at that point, the real focus on that is really working with you and your family members. If there's, this may be the place where you're starting to bring a child in. You say, hey, I don't want to talk to them about everything, but I want them to just have kind of a working 30,000 foot view of what's going on in case something happens to me. So are you able to do a sit down meeting with them, Dave? Yes, we absolutely are. If we need to conference call them in, they're in a different state, no problem. They don't have to fly in for the meeting. We can get them on a Zoom call. But what we want to do at this stage is really make sure we manage your planned RMDs and the taxes that you pay on them. And we make sure we maximize, if you're wanting to do charitable gifting or things at the state, we maximize how we do the charitable gifting to save you, again, as much money as taxes as we can, okay? And because every dollar we save you in taxes is just going to mean you have more dollars to give to, whether it's church charity or whether it's your children, niece, nephew, anybody. Or if you want to spend it, depending on your taste in wine, I always say, every $20 is a new experience. So late retirement. Now, let's say you're in those no-go, slow-go years, right? Okay, at that stage, what we want to make sure we do is we want to pull things together. So for a lot of people, especially the self-directed people, you may be watching this and you may self-direct everything. You may say, look, Dave, I am early retirement, middle retirement. I'm good to go. No problems. I keep up on all this stuff. I actually know more than you shared today. Good for you. How about your spouse? What's the plan if something happens to you? And what I already know the answer. We can he and haw and talk scenarios, but I know what happens. Something happens to you, and if you're the primary person that handles the money, balances the checkbook, works on the investments, pays the insurance premiums, then the surviving spouse is in a world of hurt, and now they have no idea who to work with. So even if you want to be self-directed, and even if you want to make all your choices and this, that, the reality is there's going to become a point in time where it's just not going to work. Okay. And so having a backup, having someone that your spouse can come to and can talk to, and that has already been introduced 5, 10, 15, 20 years before, so that it's not a, who do we talk to? That makes all the difference in the world for continuity of the great financial plan that you already put in place. Because I'm assuming if you're self-managed, you're doing an awesome job. So we just need to know what your plan is. We need to know how you want it fulfilled. And as long as we agree with it, we'll help you carry that out going forward. Okay. So if you're in that late retirement stage, we really want to make sure at that point that we organize all those assets. Because again, if there's a survivor situation and they don't have any idea, they just have filing cabinets of documents, whether it's a spouse or whether it's the children, right? That's just a nightmare. So the number one thing that we always do for our clients is we use our eMoney software, and we have a balance sheet with a list of assets and liabilities, right? And we link everything in, and so that it's constantly updating. And so that the idea with that is that if something happened to you, we have a list of everything you've got. Now, we may not have the KU bill, we may not have the Kentucky American Water bill, right? Or if you're in a different state with a different utility bill. But nobody cares about that. What they care about is those hard-earned assets and anything that would add value to your estate. One little bill doesn't matter. But we will help you organize that. And then, when we're organizing it, what we'll also do is we'll give you the extra benefit of actually organizing those assets and looking at them and saying, hey, have you ever thought of this? If you just, instead of doing B, if you just did C or D, this could really, maybe it saves you $3,000 or $5,000 a year, right? Okay. Maybe it saves you $100,000 a year. Maybe it saves the kids $250,000 or $500,000 in taxes that they had no idea they'd pay, and then with that $250,000, $500,000, you now don't need to, with savings, you don't need to leave as much money to the kids. What we can do is we can maximize your lifestyle, or you can do some fun family trips with the kids, but not feeling like, oh, I'm spending their retirement, their inheritance. No, you can do some fun things with them, but it's all about looking at and getting a full view of what you're doing with those assets and then helping you come up with a plan for it. Sound good? Okay. So the bottom line is with all this is simply, if you can manage those actions in all of your accounts, that's this last point, so that you just pay as low a tax rate as possible, then you succeeded. And the fun part about it is, as you get through the rest of your retirement, those tax rules and those tax laws are going to change each and every year. So if you're keeping up with it, great, keep up with it. But if you're one of those people that you're like, hey, you know what? There's actually something I'd rather do than financial planning in my retirement. And for a lot of you, I'm a nerd. I love financial planning. I love the investment markets. I love insurance. I love all those things. They're great. They're fun to learn about, to do, to help people with. I know for a lot of you, you don't share that. So outsource it. Let us know how we can help you. If there's a question of a certain area today that we touched on that you're like, I need more about Social Security. I need more about Medicare. I need more about charitable gifting, right? Or I just want you to review my portfolio to figure out, am I properly positioned for this kind of new world that we find ourselves in? Feel free to email me at my email address there, or just simply call the office, 859-219-1006. If I'm available right then, they'll patch you right through. If not, the office will set up a time for us to talk. We'll do our quick just phone chat. And then if there's anything additional we need to do, we'll have you into the office and go from there. I hope this was beneficial for you. We do not want retirement to be a scary stage at all. We want it to be a time where you're thriving, and we want you to be able to choose how you enter retirement, and also choose the experience that you have in retirement, and choose how you exit it. So, and the way in which you want to have your family remember you, and the way in which you want to have civic and charitable organizations remember you. And at the end of the day, just what the story is they'll tell. And, typically it's not like, oh, he left me a certain amount of money or she left me a certain amount of money. It's going to be, do you remember when we got to do this? Or remember when we got to do that? Do you remember the trip we took or the event we had, or how we helped that nonprofit, or served in that soup kitchen, or what built the house, or whatever it might be for Habitat for Humanity. Those are the memories a lot of times the kids take away from it. And so congrats to you as you work towards retirement. Get to the stage of being retired, having the cash flow, having the choice of what you do with your time. And if there's anything we can do to help you get there, please do let us know. This has been a Thursday Thought. I'm Dave Smith. Until next time, thank you.